All right. So good afternoon, everyone. I know a few of us have already been saying our hellos. There are a lot of familiar faces here. We're excited to have everyone on for today's Boston, New England data group meeting. My name's Ann Ritho. I'm from the Byte Data team. We help coordinate the New England group. So excited to have you all here. Like I said, I see a lot of familiar faces, people who have been at our previous meetings and some new faces. We also heard that we have some other data group leaders on here. So typically we would do intros if we had a smaller group. I think today that would be a lot. So if you want to drop in the chat, where you're from, maybe we can start to make some connections geographically across. If there are other people in Cleveland, put those in the chat and just say hi there and we can get the conversation going there a little bit. As we dive in, as I said, feel free to use the Q&A. Please keep yourselves on mute. And if you experience any technical issues, feel free to ping the chat. I'll be taking a closer look at that. And I think, Tarek, you said you'd keep an eye on technical issues in the chat as well. So thank you. And with that, I'll go into our agenda for the day. So we'll start off with introductions to our speakers. I'll do a brief overview. Our speakers today are Chris Scalisi, Kyle Grobler, and Mike Ronayne. So thank you all. We have, I feel like, powerhouse speakers. I'm really excited to hear from everyone. So excited to have you all here. And then we will, I'll do just a very high level, anything they haven't covered on any recent trade news, I'll recap quickly, and then we'll go right into Q&A and discussion and try to make sure that we leave enough time to dig in there and get some good conversation going. As I said at the beginning, we won't record that part just to make sure everyone is able to ask questions and really make most of the networking opportunity. So with that, I'll do our intros. So we have Chris, who I think many people on here know. He says hi to everyone and is very well known in the trade community. But for those of you who don't know him, he is a strategic advisor with Mohawk Global and a certified customs specialist. He's known for building robust compliance programs and has been recognized by US ICPA and New York State for his leadership in medical device exports, regional trades, and regional trade strategies. He also has deep expertise in foreign trade zones. He co-chairs other data groups and is very regularly writing and speaking on emerging trade risks. So Chris today will be covering partnerships for better global trade compliance, and we're excited to have him. Kyle is the Global Trade Manager at TE Connectivity. He has a track record of generating over 50 million in duty savings, leading high-performing compliance teams. He is based in Ireland, so we appreciate you, Kyle, for calling in from across the pond so late in your day. He's held key roles across multiple industries and has deep expertise in global logistics, audit readiness, free trade agreements, and regulatory strategy. And today, Kyle will be covering the importance of audits, common pitfalls in compliance and audits, and what he sees as the #1 most common mistake made. So excited to have you, Kyle. Thanks for being here. And also, last but not least, we have Michael Ronayne, who is a national security and export enforcement expert. He did over 20 years with Homeland Security investigations, where he led counter-proliferation and supply chain risk programs. He's also served as a subject matter expert with New Borders and helped organizations navigate high-risk trade and compliance environments. He brings deep insights into export controls, transnational threats, and investigative strategy. And today, Mike will be covering export control updates, as well as walk us through some real-world enforcement use cases that I think everyone will be very interested in. So thanks for being here, Mike. And with that, I will hand it over to Chris to get us started.
That's great. Thank you, Ann. And both a huge shout out to and thanks to both Ann and Tariq for leading the Boston data group. It's really important that these data groups are out there. And one thing I just wanted to add, just a plug for ICPA. You don't have to be a member of ICPA to be part of the data groups. They are free for everybody to attend, both virtually and in person. And, if you have folks that in the trade community that can benefit on these meetings, please spread the word. We welcome everybody, and it's a great opportunity that we can all learn and collaborate with one another. But, and I appreciate Ann and Tariq for inviting me to talk about, as we all know, we're probably all ripping our hair out because of this current situation of the new administration coming up with these, trade wars and tariffs with all these different countries. And we saw that flyer, the big post of countries in no alphabetical order, no percentage order, and everything being thrown out there. And what we found was there's a lot of uncertainty, and that's no surprise there. Over 11 executive orders, 230 CSMM messages, and trade compliance is being noticed. Our family is realizing what we do for a living. The C-suite is now knowing who are those people in the office on the far left of the building, which is a good and bad. And, and what we're seeing, what I'm excited about is that the people in trade compliance are being recognized for what we do each and every single day. And, one of the things I'm very a big advocate of is there are so many resources out there that companies can take advantage of when building their teams. When organizations, and many of you I know, and I'm looking forward to meet much of you as well, I'm always fascinated to say, when I started in trade compliance, I evolved from logistics. I was a one-person operation. Our trade compliance manual was a 3-ring binder with papers that we added into it. And then as that person left, we added on. And, these are unprecedented times. People I've talked in the business, whether it's been less than a year to over 50 years in business, they've never seen such dramatic change. And as we mentioned, as unprecedented times, I bucket trade compliance into three categories. Navigating the risk, optimization, and diversification. And what we're seeing now is Customs has hired over 5,000 new officers, which are more of an emphasis of HTS and audit, watching for transshipments, verification of free trade agreements. By all means, this is not a forum to scare anybody, but it should be something that you should be sharing with your stakeholders from your company that they should be aware of. This is where we've gone from the days of 9/11 when protecting the country and identifying bad actors. We have now evolved into creating revenue and they want to go back to the days of pre-internal revenue of where the country was generating tariffs to bring in. So leading into this, building those partnerships, and like I said, whether you're a one-person operation internally or a team of 1, 2, 5, or even 20, it's just as important to have your partners on the external side. And with that being said, where are you finding these partners? These are partners that are in consultants. These are partners that offer software providers. These are consultants that are subject matter experts, that are external partners that are extension of your international team. These are the companies that you're keeping the lines of communication open with and discussing the changes that are happening. So for example, you may have a person on your internal team might be very strong with foreign trade zones, but you might need somebody who has expertise and knowledge with ITAR. Or you may have somebody that's looking for that expertise and knowledge for AI, as we said, where the form has been mixed to saying some are embracing it and some are not. And as we know, AI has been reshaping our industry and many industries as well, and people are taking advantage of that. And building those relationships is very important with the external partners because it kind of feels those voids that are in your internal organization. So, for example, when navigating the risks, we talked about, when was the last time someone did a risk assessment of your organization, evaluated your tariffs, your free trade agreements, things of that sort. Are these done internally? Are they done externally? Okay, that's where we become right now on the defense right now during this time. We're playing defense because each day an EO comes out or a tweet or a blurb, senior leadership comes out and says, oh my gosh, the sky's falling. Trade compliance. What's our risk? What's our exposure? Where are we going? And you're scrambling. And even though it hasn't been officialized into a CSM message from customs, you're going, oh my gosh, are we going to be 20%? Well, the message is things have not happened yet. We have to put a contingency plan, but things haven't been ready. So making sure those internal and external partners are in there as well. I'll also jump into optimization. Optimization, now that you have everything buttoned up in your trade compliance and an opportunity to kind of say, let's take this lemony world of trade compliance that's being thrown at us and make lemonade. And we say, okay, now our trade compliance program is buttoned up and everything's good. What are we doing now to play? Are we going to be playing offense? Offense in the optimization saying, okay, our tariffs are good, our free trade agreements are good, everything's going well. Let's look at things where we can optimize. Foreign trade zones, bonded warehouses. Are we taking advantage of opportunities such as duty drawback for revenue recovery? And I know some of our partners on here will be talking about that as well. And that's where you go on the defense, right? And then the last piece that I'd like to share on there is diversification. People don't realize the knowledge and the data that we have in trade compliance that can be so useful into expansion into new global markets. And it was only brought up once this year and twice by two different trade media outlets. And it's been verified that U.S. has so many multinational companies, the U.S. companies that are owned in the U.S. have multinational companies where they own the factories and the subsidiaries around the world that are exporting products from outside countries, not only to the US, but other countries around the world, equals $8 to $10 trillion. It's mind-boggling, right? So why are we thinking of using the data from trade compliance and saying, yes, maybe due to the trade wars, might be not effective to bring this product line into the US because of the tariffs, but maybe it's being our Indonesia plant that's producing product that we could sell this into Canada and the EU. So diversification does play a big part of it. But again, finding those partners globally around the world that can coincide and work with you. So this is where I've been really passionate with trade compliance, is saying there is no one turnkey solution out there. It's very important that you build your external team just like your internal team. They're all team members on your own team, like a quarterback and having their defensive and offensive line and your receivers, building those teams on both internally and externally that can be part of it. And the same thing too, like an additional of the data group is part of your team as well. The best practices, the sharing of knowledge, learning from your peers on what's happening in the industry. The more knowledge we have, I was a firm believer that knowledge is power, and the more knowledge that we have, the more competitive that we can be. And it's been proven that, even though I fight with our friends from the U.S. Department of Commerce, that they say, oh no, we don't want to promote import, we promote export promotion. The best and the most successful companies out of the world are the ones that are shopping the world for the best products and the services, and then building finalized products and selling them throughout the world in and outside the United States. So, like I said, I'm going to conclude on that. And one of the things, if there's some Q&A afterwards on some suggestions on partners to look at, one of the things I'd like to add is looking for great partners through data groups, looking through partners through the ICPA conferences, looking through partners through different trade events, such as NCBA, FAA, NATFZ. There's many different organizations out there that have different trade partners. And the best thing to do when you're vetting them is to ask them simple questions like, what are your normal lines of communications? Do you guys do QBRs? Do you guys do reviews that, okay, once we sign on the dotted line, we're moving forward? Are we communicating with one another? Because so many times people will say, oh yeah, I got this great product or this great service, and then all of a sudden the lights are out, and we're kind of like mending through the minutia of trying to figure our way around. And that's where you find great partners, is they keep those lines of communication open and say, we're not looking for a vendor, we're not looking for a service provider, we're looking for a partner of an extension of our international team that will help us grow. And it's also very important, and I'll conclude on this in my last 30 seconds, is it's very important that the culture and the synergies between the internal and external partners work very closely together, that you form as one team and accomplish the goals of your leadership. And with 20 seconds to spare, I'm going to hand it back to you, Ann.
Thanks, Chris. I would have given you another 20 seconds or so. Don't worry.
Oh, that's cool.
We weren't going to cut you off.
I'm very excited about with Kyle and Mike and our team, and just looking at the names of people on here. There is a great group of people on this forum, and I think we're going to learn a lot today, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what the others have to say as well.
Thank you. Yeah, and I've put a few links in the chat to some of the groups that you mentioned. But as Chris said, if anyone has any other groups or anything that they wanted to share, feel free to drop those in there. And with that, yeah, we'll hand it to you, Kyle. Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys. Everyone can see my screen, yeah? Perfect. So good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here at the ICPA Boston event. Thank you, Anna and Tariq, for having me. So for this event, there were two speakers, Barack Obama and me. And unfortunately, you guys are sat here with me today. So let's be honest, audit, why now? Auditing for me has been the single catalyst that's really catapulted global trade for me and throughout my career. It's an internal customs audit, right? It gives you a chance to mirror before customs comes knocking, right? You are showing regulators that we're all invested in governance and tells your stakeholders where the leakages are and the opportunities hide. I mean, just a quick show of hands, who's audited? I put this as the last 12 months, but I mean, the 12 months, guys, isn't good enough. You know, like really it should be, have you audited in the last month? You know, whatever that cadence may be for you. Auditing for me is where the opportunities lie, where when I say opportunities, let's be clear here. The opportunities where things are going wrong, the opportunity where improvements can happen, the opportunities where savings can happen, and also highlights the things that you guys are doing great. There's no point focusing on all the things that you're doing great because those things are well, right? You can slightly audit those, but you really want to find out where are the things that are dragging your business down. And this varies from business to business. A business in AD&M has a different risk tolerance to someone that's in the medical sector or someone that's, shipping cars. So understanding that, is absolutely, vital to your organization. And like I said, the reason why trade is so complicated is there's not one size fits all. So like what I'm going to say today might not really fit your organization, but I'm hoping that you can take some snippets from it and implement it in your day-to-day trade operations. Slide 2, yeah. And so there's 3 pillars of customs, and we could probably have a good conversation as there's probably more. But how I see it is, the 3, at the very least, the immutable pillars are origin, which we all know has been all over the news in the USA, people claiming origin when they shouldn't be claiming origin and trying to fake this and go around it. It's what crippled organizations with fines and penalties and scrutinization, and the same with classification evaluation. These 3, for me, are absolutely fundamental to make sure you get right, in addition to making sure you have the correct licensing requirements if your goods, require a license. Origin decides the preferential programs. If there's any sanctions exposure, are we able to import these? Are we able to export these? Is there a preferential duty rate? Are we going to get slammed with CVD, or ADD? So origin is absolutely crucial and fundamental. It's not also where you bought the product from. Oftentimes you say, okay, we're buying the product in Portugal. The origin must be Portuguese. And I know this sounds like a moot point, but there are some people in trade and in customs and in logistics who think like that, in procurement, right? They think, oh no, we bought it in Mexico, therefore the origin is Mexico. No, it doesn't work like that. Oh no, there's some manufacturing that happened in Mexico was blocked. Well, that doesn't go, past substantial transformation. Origin is a very, very extremely complex product, especially if you have 1,000 SKUs that make up, your final SKU. You have to, evaluate all of that. So it is something that's very, very complex, and there is technology advancing. We are making, waves and links in this to try mitigate the risk of doing it yourself or on spreadsheets. But it's something that that needs to have more time and needs to be spoken about more. I think the only reason why it's been spoken about more lately is because of what's going on in the USA. And I've seen people post and talk about, oh, origin is important. I'm like, well, hang on a second, guys. Origin has always been important. It's not only today. It's not only yesterday. It's always been a fundamental part of trade. And then Of course, we go into the next pillar here, which is valuation. Valuation is key. It decides the duty outlay, right? So valuation, there's a few methods to understand it. 98% of valuation is based on the transactional value, the goods, the value that you actually paid for the goods. But then there's other things like, if you are working for the same company, let's say you're working for a company in the United States and that same company in South America, did that relationship influence the price? Because oftentimes I've been in early on in my trade career, I remember a company in Europe speaking to a company in South Africa, and they said, no, we're going to give it to you for a lower price. And I was like, well, can you do that? Right. And I had no idea, but I was like, okay, that's fine. And I went about my business. But these things are still happening today. I bumped into an importer the other day along my walk in Salt Hill, and we just got to chatting, and somehow it came out that I was in global trade. And she says, no, she buys goods from a supplier, and when she imports it, the supplier says, look, I'll put $200 on the invoice. And she was like, okay, no, that's fine. And I was like, you can't do that. Right. But the point that I'm not trying to labor the point. The point is these things are happening all the time. And we need to understand, is the price that we actually paying? So again, back to that audit, is there a PO placed? So when I place the PO for $100, is the invoice being raised $100? And is the payment for that invoice still $100? And that's the type of auditing that you want to document and track. So if customs come and audit you, say, look, we've done our homework. We have the PO, we have the price, we have absolutely everything, the import entry, everything matches. Everything's $100. We're fine. And then the last but not least, the thing that I see fundamentally is the most wrong in every place that I've ever seen or spoken to individuals is classification. It's a humble string of digits that, if you lose sleep over it, and the audit findings are always immense, because the devil, again, is in the details. Trade compliance is intense. There's a lot of details that you have to follow. And a lot of the times, I'm going to be blunt here. Someone considers I'm a subject matter expert. I know how to classify, but they're classifying it wrong, right? Because also classification is also a little bit biased, right? So I'm interpreting what the information is being giving it to me now, and based on that information and my own bias, I'm coming up with the code, right? So it's not to say that they're wrong or terrible, but you have to try to remove your bias, focus on the actual item, go through the GRR rules, go through the chapter notes, look at any cross rulings, and it's super, super intense. But it's the number one thing that bleeds companies. It bleeds companies because when you get it wrong, you get fined. And when you get it wrong, you either pay more or pay less, right? So understanding it is absolutely crucial and fundamental to your global trade operations. And this is where I see companies getting it wrong more than the valuation, more than the origin, is the classification. And I mean, which, I guess the question, which one of these pillars keeps you guys up at night? I mean, I know for myself, it's been all three, and it remains to be all three. I wish I could just say it's all one, but because I'm so focused on setting the bar extremely high that there's no exceptions to setting that bar, I don't surrender myself to mediocrity when it comes to my job and what I do here. I have such a high standard that each one of these things are as important as each other, and they all deserve to be first, second. It's not first, second, and third. They all should be first, and first. So they definitely go hand in hand, and then you put that combination together, they're all just absolutely fundamental to making sure you're killing it in your trade. And then the audit deep dive framework. So just give me a second here, guys. I think I went past one here. Okay, my bad. Thank you for your patience and understanding. I'm a trade compliance person. I'm not a webinar PowerPoint person, so I appreciate your patience. So, why is classification so often wrong? And I kind of alluded to it earlier. It's the ambiguity of design, right? It's the harmonized system was built for universality, not precision, right? So I think it's about time that we maybe relook at it and start going from piece to piece, item to item, and really adding new things to it, which obviously it is updated, depending on where you are, part of the world, etc. These are updated in the EU. We get classification updates every January. And I think there's a big one every 4 years. And it's just, there's so many things, that could almost be the same. And that's what makes it extremely difficult. And again, open to interpretation. And then we have like the GRI rules. And I don't know how familiar everyone is on this call about the GRI rules, but you might as well be speaking Mandarin to me sometimes. Like when I first got introduced to the GRI rules, I was like, what the hell is this? I said, I speak English. This doesn't even make sense to me, right? And then the guy was like, oh no, rule 1 and 6 is generally the most common rules to decide it. And it's taken me an extremely long time of like trial and error, getting it wrong and getting it wrong and getting it wrong, that now I eventually understand it. But again, it's parts of the process. You can't just go in there and start classifying goods because it says X and you think this is where it lies. Like, you have to show customs every time you classify an item, which GIR rules did you use? So you document it. I used 1 and 6. I looked at the heading notes, I looked at the chapter notes, and I cross-ruled, and you document all of that. So when customs come and audit you, and let's say you're wrong, they can at least see that you put in the due diligence to try understand to get to the right code. And I'm telling you, when you show customs due diligence, at least from my experience, they're a lot more lenient. And I know there's obviously other horror stories out there, but at least from our own personal experience, if you're able to show customs that you're at least trying to do the best that you can, given the resources that you have, they tend to play a bit more ball. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't fine you, you're right, but I think they're just, more intent and more inclined to help you guys along the way. And then, last of is justifications and rulings, BTIs, binding tariff rulings, whatever we want to call them, similar to classification, HTS, they all have, various names. But, once you've done that, you've gone through your chapter notes, you've gone through your explanatory notes, you've done your GR rules, then, for me, what I generally do is after I've come to all that conclusion, I then go try find another ruling somewhere else in the world just to kind of see. And then as an extra layer of that, I typically get 3 people to do my classification. So if I arrive at a classification, I'll have someone somewhere else in another country look at that classification, and then I'll have someone else look at that classification, because the idea here is if we can get at least 3 yeses, our chance of being correct is far higher than 1 or 2. And then oftentimes you get 1 or 2, and then more times often than not you get 3. But again, when you present it in such a fashion that you've gone through your GIR rules, you've articulated, you've showed it, you've showed your chapter notes, your explanatory notes, and your cross-reference. When I hand it over to the next person, I almost think maybe their bias is kicked in because they see all the legwork that you've done. But getting a second and third opinion, I know it seems laborsome, but imagine not doing the homework and then getting fined 10 million for not doing the homework. I mean, just do the homework and then avoid the 10 million fine. For me, that just makes business sense, and it just mitigates the risk exposure. Oh, and then back there, have you guys used any advanced rulings or BTIs this year? These are especially for the products that you're uncertain about or unsure about or have some ambiguity. I recommend going this route. Other people would probably have a different opinion just because you're stuck on that code for some time. But again, whatever works for you and your risk tolerance and what your business wants to do, I would encourage that. Okay. Audit deep dive framework. Let's operationalize all of this. I use the 4-step loop, simple enough for anyone, but robust enough for auditors. Building the right sample is crucial, right? And again, it goes to the points that I've spoken about already. Is this, a classification? Is it a duty spend? Is it an origin thing? Is it a valuation thing? Is it a related party thing? Is it, the list can go on, and it's for you guys who are immersed in the business to try identify and prioritize what the right sample looks like. So what it looks like for me and looks like for you is probably going to be completely different, and it depends on your risk tolerance, right? So to pull obviously the data and then do your risk factors. Some might say high duty rates, new suppliers, classification changes, a sudden spike in duties. Maybe doing your highest volume of SKUs to say, okay, I'm importing these 10 SKUs. Let me just do a forecast. What I would do is I'd pull a forecast, look at my SKUs that are the high runners, in value or in quantity. I would review those, right? And say, okay, let me just do my due diligence here. Is the origin that we claim is correct? Is the valuation that we have here correct? Is the classification correct, right? And by identifying these risk factors and auditing them accordingly and documenting them is also it can also obviously change from period to period. But when you're auditing, it's of my opinion, and I'd love to hear everyone else's, like, you just document absolutely everything. Like, even if you've audited one thing, you let customs know somewhere on a spreadsheet, on a document, hey, I've audited this box, I've audited this code, this is my rationale, this is my conclusion, and here's my evidence of doing it. And then, applying the methodologies that I spoke to you earlier about classification, because again, everywhere I've worked, this has always been a problem for everyone. And I'm pretty sure everyone on this call could give the nod and understand that it's something that haunts all of them, right? They've all been at some point got it wrong, penalized or et cetera, and overexposure. So applying the classification methodology, correctly and accurately is always a good one. And then again, not to beat a dead horse, for lack of better words, is validate with any cross rulings, check any BTIs. And then last, to Chris's point earlier, if you're unsure, seek expertise. Ask someone. There are lots of groups, there are lots of people, professionals out there with the advancements in technology, in AI and etc. With the whole AI movement, this is the worst AI is ever going to be, so it's only going to get better. But if all else fails, seek someone, ask for help, seek the professionals out there. There are a ton of people out there that know 10 times more about me in classification than I'll ever know, and I feel privileged to even say that and be able to have those people close by if and when that time comes. And then really just document and loop back. How many of your procedures and processes are documented when you are auditing. And yeah, and last but not least, are we good on time, Anne?
Yeah, you're good.
So,
keep going.
all right. And then now leadership or your stakeholders will ask, what's the return on investment with auditing, because it takes resources. It takes resources. Let me quantify what resources is. Resources is time, right? So time, there's a value to time. It's not just your time on the clock. It's there's a value associated with you. Let's say you're on $1 an hour. There's your time and the dollar an hour, and then it's your time and your counterparts and everyone else that's involved in it, their time and their hour, right? So again, what's the return on investment? And some of the ways that that you might be able to answer that is, quantify the cost avoidance and refunds, right? Some companies have got refunded, multi-millions, and then also mitigated paying multi-millions unnecessarily because of wrong origin determinations or declarations done with customs or using the wrong valuation. So these are, in and itself, if you're speaking to your C-suite team, I mean, the return on investment in an audit, for me, I would always say it's probably 10 to 1, and I'm making that number up, but it's probably way more, just from my experience. Every misclassification you fix before custom finds it prevents a retroactive duty hammering, right? And interest, right? So every misclassification you find puts money back into the bank account, and it should not go unmentioned. Oftentimes I hear of trade compliance people saying, oh no, we saved duties. That's only a very small part of looking at. Not only have you saved duties, you've protected the company's bottom line and you've protected the margin of that product. Now you're protecting your competitiveness with your other customers. So yes, you've saved duties, but it goes far beyond that. It goes far beyond just saving money for the company. And the second, to highlight, the preferential wins, collecting a code that can unlock duty-free treatment, insert your region here, with Costa Rica, Canada, Mexico, which obviously maybe I shouldn't speak about because it's up in the air. But for those other countries that, the president still wants to avail of, highlight that, create a narrative that executives appreciate. For example, our audit found $450,000 in potential exposure and $120,000 in annual savings. That's a 4-to-1, 4-to-1 audit on our hours. So for me, auditing just makes sense. For me, it makes sense because you take the time, you understand. And you guys, you might say, "Oh, I don't have the data. I don't have it." Well, let me tell you something. This should come to no surprise. When I audit, I also pull the physical documents because I can't always trust all the data. Yes, the data there, it's great. I use it, but for a ton of my entries, I pull the data. When I first joined companies, people can say, oh no, we have great data. I'm like, that's fine. So when I first joined companies, I set up in my kitchen, I have about 4 or 5 screens set up. My wife absolutely does not like me during those months when I'm doing that. But I'm literally on every screen, I've pulled hard copies of all the data and I'm going through every single line that's captured on that declaration with the documents that I have. I'm looking at the air labels, I'm looking at the packing list, I'm looking at the Euro ones, I'm looking at the FTAs, I'm looking at absolutely everything. And once I've decided that the data is accurate and correct and stand by, then I can start looking at the data more and then be selective on the documents that I pull. So I guess, after all of this, what's one change that you guys will implement, starting Monday? Let me know your thoughts. Thank you guys. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Kyle. I always love speaking with you. Your passion is on audits is always like palpable. So thank you so much.
Very welcome.
I feel like that was
to include one recent good trend that I've seen, 2 recent examples of trade enforcement actions. In terms of my background, I was a special agent with both the United States Customs Service as well as the Department of Homeland Security. I was a supervisory special agent in Philadelphia. I moved to headquarters where I was the unit chief for HSI's Counterproliferation Investigations Unit. So I had operational oversight for the program at the national level. And just before retirement, I spent my last 3 years in my hometown of Boston as assistant special agent in charge for both the National Security Division and the Global Trade Investigations Division for HSI. So just real briefly, enforcement is obviously a critical mission for the U.S. government, with the overarching goal, obviously, to protect U.S. people, U.S. industry, consumers, consumer health, and national security. In terms of export enforcement over the last few years, obviously, we've seen a dramatic increase in the use of sanctions, additions to the various entity lists, and ever expanding export controls. From the import side, what we're looking at, or what I sometimes include myself still, and we, it's the government, but what they look at, obviously tariffs are a big deal right now, new Section 232 investigations, and obviously also a focus on products of forced labor. And interestingly, I recently saw the DOJ white collar section said that trade and customs fraud will be the second highest impact enforcement category. So very interesting. I had not seen that in my 20 years, probably 17 of those years I was conducting primarily export investigations. In terms of trends, I was trying to think of what a good trend would be to discuss today. And, one of the things I see a tremendous difference in is really how the collaborative effort, I would say, amongst all the agencies that operate within this space. There are a significant amount of agencies conducting trade enforcement, trade investigations. The Department of Homeland Security, obviously Homeland Security investigations. My former agency, we were the investigators at the border. You have U.S. Customs and Border Protection, the uniform officers at the border. The Department of Justice has obviously all of our federal prosecutors in the FBI, the Department of Commerce, Defense Criminal Investigative Service. All of these agencies have unique authorities and bring significant sort of tools to the table. And, sort of toward the end of my career, earlier in my career, agents and agencies took a more sort of proprietary territorial approach to their investigations, which really, in my mind, didn't really make the most sense. And now I'm certainly seeing more of a whole of government approach. And certainly that's the best way for enforcement to operate effectively and efficiently for the U.S. public. Quick point about enforcement. The U.S. government isn't looking to criminally prosecute mistakes. And, as Kyle said and Chris said, there's a lot of information out there now. So you can't, but the point is you can't actually be willfully blind. You can't say, hey, I didn't know this, or I was unaware. There's too much information out there. There's too many resources now. If you do run into an issue, you're going to be really hard pressed if you don't have a good compliance program in place to just say, hey, I didn't know. I conducted an investigation once where somebody just told me, hey, once the product leaves here, it's not my problem. Well, as it turns out, obviously it is, and it was his problem. And, there were bigger things in claiming that he was willfully blind to what was occurring, and he was ultimately charged. But what I typically saw in my career was companies really make a concerted effort to exercise due diligence. It's not always easy, especially in this current climate. You need to be aware of a lot of different things, latest sanctions, classifying your products, obviously, and avoiding transshipment concerns. So I'm going to jump into 2 cases that were recently announced. And basically, this is all open source information. Obviously, I wasn't involved in either of these 2 cases, but they pose sort of 2 separate, it's sort of very different conduct. The first one is a settlement with BIS, and I'll talk about that first. But the second one is a case where there's actual criminal conduct and intent and knowledge of the violation. So we're looking at 2 certainly different circumstances from the enforcement standpoint. So the first one, on July 2nd, BIS announced an administrative enforcement settlement with Alpha and Omega Semiconductor. I'll just refer to them as AOS moving forward for simplicity. A company located in California that, according to the announcement, and this is a quote, designs, develops, and supplies semiconductors for a wide variety of applications. So BIS stated that between May and November of 2019, AOS committed 15 violations of the Export Administration Regulations by forwarding over 1,600 commodities to include power controllers, smart power stages, which apparently are specialized circuits that deliver and regulate power, and accessories to Huawei Technology, a company listed on the BIS entity list since May of 2019. So these items were designated as EAR 99, meaning they're subject to the AIR, but they're not on the Commerce Control List. And BIS also contended that on at least 11 of those occasions, AOS was aware of a specifically high probability that violations would occur. So as most of you probably know, Huawei is alleged by the U.S. government to have close ties to the Chinese government, was listed because they're engaged in activities that are contrary to U.S. national security. They've also been charged by DOJ in the past for racketeering, conspiracy to steal trade secrets, and deceptive banking practices relative or related to business with Iran. Now, the items in question here were foreign designed and foreign produced, but they were ultimately exported from the U.S., so they were subject to the EAR. Now, once Huawei was added to the list, AOS initially halted all of their shipments, and good decision there. They're trying to figure out what they can and cannot do. So in order to establish Huawei as a customer, AOS's digital power business, which conducted most of their business in Austin, Texas, needed to provide some samples to Huawei for testing. So again, good decision. They consulted with outside counsel to make a determination on the legality of conducting business with China, to include Huawei, even before Huawei was added to that entity list. And the talks continued with counsel to see what the posture was after Huawei had been added to the list. Again, good decision. The information provided to counsel said that the products would be manufactured, tested, and packaged in China. So around May of 2019, and based on that information, counsel provided a response that included guidance stating that the products would not contain, if the products would not contain more than the de minimis amount of U.S. controlled items, they wouldn't be subject to the EAR. But if they had not been provided with specific, but they weren't provided with the specific products, so they said if you're unsure, halt all the shipments. One of the problems was that AOS failed to provide to counsel the fact that the products were to be exported ultimately from the United States, and did not seek further guidance. So in May of 2019, AOS executives traveled to China to meet with Huawei officials, and then subsequent to this meeting, an AOS official in Taiwan called back to the U.S., referenced the meeting, and said, a quote, that the quote is, can provide products to Huawei, even digital power. And the email requested that 200 smart power stage samples be sent to AOS in Shenzhen, China, which were shipped from the U.S. that day. So ultimately, between May 28th and June 7th, AOS employees on 4 occasions exported approximately 600 power controllers to the AOS facility in China for use by Huawei in violation of the EAR. So subsequent to those shipments, on June 6th, counsel provided AOS with further guidance, specifically stating that they may not provide any AOS products to Huawei or its affiliates that originate in the U.S. or essentially had any nexus to the U.S., transited, went through the U.S. After receiving the guidance, though, AOS failed to distribute the guidance or take any action to determine if they were, in fact, exporting their products from the U.S. So on 11 additional occasions, AOS exported over 1,000 items for use by Huawei without authorization in the form of a license, again, to a company on the entity list, which was in violation of the EAR. So the settlement agreement included a civil penalty of over $4 million that must be paid to the Department of Commerce, which within 30 days of that notice. So before I jump into the next case, in this case, it sounded like they, initially, we're going down the right path. sought advice from counsel with regard to their exports, knew that BIS was on the entity list, realized that obviously that's a massive red flag. What can we do at this point? But I obviously don't know what happened after that. If there was, sounds like potentially a communication issue, but regardless, obviously this was a costly error for AOS. So the second case is one of Bakram Ostavari. On July 11th, DOJ announced the arrest of Ostavari, who's an Iranian national and a lawful permanent resident of the U.S., essentially meaning he has a green card, and charged with a 4-count indictment for exporting electronics used in railways, telecommunication systems, to Iran in violation of ICPA and the Iranian transactions sanctions regulations. In this case, it's, as you'll see as we walk.
Now I have lost audio. Anyone else?
Yeah, he's frozen.
Okay. He's frozen.
He froze.
Yeah, I'm just
No.
looking. Oh, are you back, Mike?
Back?
Yes.
Okay.
There, yeah. If you can hear us, yeah, you're back online.
All right, I'll finish up real quickly. So basically, Ostavari founded an Iranian-based engineering company that provided signal and communications equipment to Iran and its government, including projects for Iran railways. Excuse me. So from 2018 through 2025, Ostavari and his co-conspirators shipped commodities, including computer processors and other equipment, to include electronics, to Iran. And then here, some of the intent comes in is the scheme included the use of front companies in the U.S. In the UAE to disguise the true end users for these products. And Ostavari directed his co-conspirators in the UAE to then ship the goods onto Iran upon arrival in the UAE. In terms of this case, in terms of violation of the export regs, knowledge is very important. And they were able to prove knowledge and intent in this case after seeing that Ostavari had mentioned U.S. sanctions against Iran in an email and directed one of his co-conspirators to provide false information to a federal officer regarding end use. So again, pretty clear cut. If these allegations are correct, pretty clear cut that he had knowledge and intent to violate the U.S. laws. Very different situation than the AOS. But if convicted, Ostavari is looking at up to 20 years in prison for each count of these violations. And then just to close out, sort of back to the collaborative nature of the government, this case was investigated by both HSI and the Department of Commerce, and I think a great example of collaborative effort that the government is exhibiting now.
Thank you so much, Mike. And kind of looking back at the collaborative effort of the government brings us back to what we started in terms of collaborative efforts that we all should be applying to our trade compliance. So if the government's being collaborative, the private sector should too, right? So using what's available, using resources. I saw a question come in from Michael as well on it was on the other chat, but how helpful reaching out to import specialists have been. So even that cross collaboration between the private sector and making use of resources that are available in the government, I think is also helpful. Not sure if anyone had any answer to Michael's question around, how helpful people have been, if anyone has been reaching out to import specialists. Thank you to everyone who's stayed with us. I know we're at time. I have posted the accreditation information in the chat, but for those of us who still are on, I just want to quickly highlight just a few. I think everyone on is aware of the changes to the tariffs that are coming through. That's in the news. That's in your CSMS guidance. So if you're not signed up for that, definitely get signed up for that. There's a lot of useful information that comes in through there. Just at a very high level, also steel and aluminum tariffs. This was back in June. That went into effect in terms of going up to that 50%. So again, just keeping an eye on things as they change. There are new 301 and 232 investigations coming out or underway, looking at critical minerals, semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, truck parts. So across multiple industries, I know we've talked a lot about partnerships on here and how to keep track of all of this. So make sure you have, a source of finding all of this and tracking all of this. And I know everyone has their Excel spreadsheets that they've set up to keep track of everything. And Michelle, you're on my video right now, so I know you put out useful, guides to CSMS guidance, which ones to pay attention to, which ones that reach tariffs. If anyone does want to reach out to me, I'm happy to walk through kind of at BITE how we track everything and our process of tracking tariff updates. Also, the AD/CVD investigation, some new cases to be on the lookout for around steel, concrete, reinforcing bar, hardwood, and decorative plywood. So again, just highlighting kind of the vast disparate number of products and everything that's covered. So it's a lot to keep track of no matter what industry you're in. So I'm happy to be a resource to anyone. And on the last chat, I did post LinkedIn profiles for our speakers, but just wanted to quickly highlight some of the things, additional resources that have come out recently. The forced labor WROs and finding dashboards have been updated as well. So if you are interested in looking at those findings dashboards, those have been updated recently. And on the export side, BIS has launched an interactive commerce control list and updated website. So it is pretty cool. I've played around with it a little bit. So if you are doing any exports, checking that out. Again, happy to walk through any of those resources with anyone on the call and just chat through kind of how to make better use of what's available to all of us. So with that, I want to open it up for questions.